Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. I'm joined today by Jim Antle, Executive Editor of the magazine. And Jim, let's talk about Trump's big, beautiful bill. It's passed the Senate, having already passed the House. It's gone back to the House. July 4th is his deadline. Assuming passage, put into perspective the scale of this achievement for Trump. It fulfills a number of campaign pledges. It could be, well, is it the defining piece of legislation for his second term? Tell us a little bit how we should see this.
Sure. I think for both good and for ill, it will be the defining piece of legislation for Trump's second term. It will make permanent the Trump tax cuts, which were the defining accomplishment, I think, legislatively of the first term. The Supreme Court and other things might have ultimately been more important, but in terms of legislation, it also funds Trump's immigration enforcement agenda, fulfilling a campaign promise from 2016 that didn't really get completed, which would be finishing the border wall. Now, Trump has had some success at the border regardless of the legislative situation, but this would really allow him to do the mass deportations that he promised and continue that enforcement priority. And he's also been able to revise the Trump tax cuts in certain ways that I think he believes will make it more friendly to his working class base. So the no taxes on tips, the no taxes on overtime, reducing some of the taxes on Social Security benefits. Now, there are some arguments against those policies, but certainly from a political perspective, you could see why Trump would want that to be how the Trump tax cuts are defined rather than as tax cuts for the wealthy.
Right. It's notable that although there's money, as you say, for border enforcement, building the wall, more ICE agents, that sort of thing, that isn't really the area of controversy. The Democrats have sort of dropped that, knowing that immigration is a big vote loser for them. The issue is no longer good for them. So they're not really, you don't hear much about that. What you hear about is the supposed, or the reforms to Medicaid. The Democrats are suggesting that all sorts of needy people are going to be denied the benefits that they should be receiving. That also, as I understand it, is not true, and that really the changes, the reforms, are designed to cut out waste, fraud, and abuse, which arguably would leave the whole program better able to serve the people for whom it was originally set up. Is that the right way to see it?
I think so, but this has been the standard Democratic playbook for decades. And anytime you can compare the size of the tax cut to any reductions in the rate of growth of spending, you know, the dollar figures, that's what Democrats are going to seize on. So they want to run against this as a tax cut for the wealthy that will be paid for by cuts to Medicaid, by working people losing their health insurance, their health care coverage. And obviously they don't want this to be seen as a more working class friendly tax bill than what Republicans might have done in the past.
Yeah. So while the Democrats exaggerate the harm, let's call it, that is done by the Medicaid reforms, clearly the Republicans rather exaggerate the benefits. Because in some ways the changes in terms of spending are pretty modest, and this isn't going to change the trajectory of the public finances, is it?
No, and I think that's the problem, and it's a problem Republicans have gotten themselves into long before Trump came to town, but certainly Trump has been unable to resolve this dilemma, is where you get enough cuts in a piece of Republican legislation that people mobilize against it and feel they might be hurt by the cuts, but even if the cuts are enacted and are followed through on, you won't see a major change to the country's fiscal picture, which is fairly dire. Nor do you in many cases find that fiscal hawks, the few remaining Republican lawmakers who care deeply about these sorts of issues, are they ever really satisfied with these cuts?
You know, of course, the votes had to be bought. The votes of people like Senator Murkowski of Alaska had to be had to be bought by watering. It seems to me an odd phenomenon that because she's broadly speaking in the center, people in the center are referred to as moderate, although there's something inherently moderate about spending more debt,
Right.
Spending more borrowed money. And that the people who don't want to spend as much and don't want to run up the national debt are regarded as somehow extreme.
Right.
But one of the things that I think really needs to be said is that the price of not passing this, the price of running up the national debt would have been instead a massive tax raise for people, like $3 or $4 trillion tax raise over the next 10 years. One of the points that is often forgotten is that the increase in the national debt and the increase in deficit spending as a result of this is only against current law, and that's because the tax cuts of 2017 are due to expire. It's not an increase over current policy.
Right.
Current policy, there's actually hundreds of billions of dollars worth of cuts against current policy, isn't there?
Right, no, that's true. There are some questions about whether some of those are too backloaded to ever really fully materialize. But yes, the Democrats are exaggerating the costs in terms of debt from the Trump tax cuts. They would not let most of these tax cuts lapse themselves. They really would only let the tax cuts for the highest income earners expire.
Right.
And those are the parts of the tax cuts that have the most dynamic effects and could recoup some of the lost revenue. So it's not a really serious argument, but it is the standard Democratic argument to treat spending as if it can go on infinitely and tax cuts as if they are some kind of unjust spending program.
Let's talk briefly about the political effects of the bill on the Republican Party. We saw Senator Thom Tillis vote against the bill at the weekend and very shortly thereafter announce his retirement under pressure from President Trump. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what happened there, but also about the way that it shows this bill has shown President Trump's complete control over the Republican Party. And it's not that, it may be that there'll be sort of some similar effects in the House, no?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. Thom Tillis discovered that his political career was no longer going to be viable if he went against Trump on this bill. Trump has definitely deepened his control of the Republican Party in his second term, and I also think he's shown a little bit of maturation in how he deals with Capitol Hill. I'm not saying necessarily that he's become a conventional political figure by any means, but he does a lot less of this, negotiating in public or setting contradictory goals on social media. He does a lot more talking to people behind the scenes, working the phones, having meetings, really trying to get people on board. But where he does still have his social media habits is when he can't get you to vote with him and he thinks your vote might be the deciding vote. And then that's where he really lays down the marker, encourages primary challengers. Thom Tillis has already bowed out of his reelection bid. Mm-hmm. Representative Thomas Massie is clearly going to try to fight any primary challenger that Trump recruits, but he could be in danger as well.
Yeah. Well, talking of unconventional figures, let's just change the subject, perhaps not entirely, but substantially, to the renewed hostilities with Elon Musk between him and the president. Is this to do with something in the bill, the ending of electric vehicle mandates, or is it something other than that? Why is this suddenly exploded into hostilities again?
Musk himself has given kind of contradictory signals on what's really motivating this. Yes, his overwhelming public argument is that he is concerned about the increase in the debt, the insufficiency of the spending cuts, and how this undercut the type of work that he was trying to do with DOGE when he was still serving in the administration. But he does let slip a little bit here and there that he doesn't think the bill is very kind to the industries of the future. It rewards the industries of the past. Just so happens that he is heavily invested in one of these industries, the electric vehicle industry. Trump reminds him of this at every opportunity when they sort of go at it. Musk is saying he will finance primary challenges in the opposite direction. He says that people who said they were going to vote to cut government spending, who instead vote for this bill, which will all be Republicans, that he will bankroll primary opponents to them and perhaps help people out like Thomas Massey, who is a strong fiscal hawk.
So that final question, it really goes to both the issue of Musk and of Tom Tillis. The Democrats say that this is a deeply unpopular bill, and it's not impossible to get polling that suggests that. Tom Tillis, when he took the call from Trump, said that this was going to really hurt blue state Republicans. And you've got Elon Musk with a lot of money and a big mouthpiece and a big speaker. What do you see the impact of this bill? How do you? Obviously, it's going to be demagogued, probably from both sides. The sort of rolling political impact into the midterm elections.
Well, nothing would be more unpopular at this point than an across-the-board tax increase. And I think the current economy, while it's chugged along reasonably well, is not strong enough to sustain that and support that kind of tax increase. So you could very easily go into recession if the bill wasn't passed, despite all of its flaws. So, I mean, I think that has to be added to the positive side of the ledger. And if the economy accelerates its growth after these tax cuts are made permanent, that would certainly be to the benefit of Republicans in the midterms. Obviously, the two big things that Republicans are going to be concerned about and that Democrats are going to demagogue going into the midterms is, do rural hospitals close because some of those provisions, and that would affect a disproportionate number of Trump voters and voters who they're trying to get to turn out for the midterms, and also what are the effects of the Medicaid reforms. And in that particular case, even if it doesn't have a big macro effect, there will probably be lots of people who say, I can't figure out how to work this website, or I was once eligible for this and now I'm not. And it won't be very difficult for Democrats to identify some of these people and use them in ads that could be politically quite effective.
Right. Well, we saw the 2017 tax bill being talked about for years, and indeed it still is. We can pretty much assume that this is going to be talked about all the way through to November of next year.
Absolutely.
That's where we'll leave it, Jim. Thanks very much for joining me here on set, and thank you all for joining us. Tune in again next time for Political Perspectives.